Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar about agentic commerce. We're calling this one the Data Reality for Agentic Commerce, Data Preparedness, Sovereignty, and Ownership. My name is Emily Kanya. I work for Human Element, and we are the hosts today of this conversation with our partners WebScale and Shopware. So just to give you a little highlight of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to explore how data preparedness, sovereignty, and real-time behavioral signals power the next generation of AI-enabled commerce. You'll learn why data ownership matters, how e-commerce platforms generate valuable intent signals, how brands can transform behavioral data from product views to search queries into actionable insights that drive revenue. By harnessing real-time commerce data instead of relying solely on historical analytics, businesses can unlock more qualified pipeline, improved marketing efficiency, and faster innovation cycles and quicker time to value. Our panel of experts today include Paul Briscoe, the Director of Technology here at Human Element, Adrian Luna, VP of Growth and Strategic Partnerships at WebScale, and Vance Ryan, Director of Solution Architecture at Shopware. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Let's talk about oil. I'm a big fan of analogies. Let's start with this one. And I think it'll actually help, quite honestly, in how we frame how we think about AI readiness. So we talk about data. I think the word data is on every single slide in this whole presentation, starting from the title slide. But quite honestly, if you think of crude oil, right, it's one of the most valuable resources on Earth, but it's in raw form. It's sitting underground. It's unrefined. It's doing nothing at the moment. The value only becomes realized when you pump it out of various sources, when you consolidate it, when you run it through a refinery, and then you use it to make something out of it, right? So commerce data, you can really think of it as the exact same thing. It's already there. Your ERP is generating data. Your storefront is generating user data. Your dealer portals, your distributor networks, your CRM, all of it's flowing right now. But it's kind of sitting in silos, right? It's unrefined, it's disconnected. And for that reason, because of that, it's really doing, I don't want to say nothing, it's doing little for your business as it's siloed, right? So what we're here to talk about today is how to change that. So with that said, I'll actually hand it over to Paul right now so we can start talking about data preparedness.
Thanks, Adrian. I think, like Adrian mentioned, we're going to talk a lot and build on this metaphor of your data in all of your various systems being the crude oil. And if all of that data is the crude oil, then your job and your business is to build that refinery, to transform all of that crude oil from all of your various siloed systems into fuel that agentic commerce can use. If we think about a lot of businesses, whether you're B2C businesses, B2B businesses, a lot of times everything that we're seeing when you're transacting online is you can lump a lot of that data into three main categories, which is PIM, your product information, your CRM, your customer information, and your ERP. So as we're kind of kicking off into this webinar, the first section that I'm going to be talking about is data preparedness. And in this case, all of these three buckets are the first sections that we're going to talk about. What is that data? How do you refine it? And then how do you use it? So let's talk a little bit about your business workflows. If there is one key takeaway that you can get from this section today, it is that you have to take and make a mental shift from simply collecting and storing that data in all of your separate systems to making it interoperable. If you can remember back to our last webinar, we talked about our iceberg analogy and all of the various things that you had to do to under the surface that kind of allows AI to work in your business. Data interoperability, a 360-degree look of who your customer is, and all of the internal tooling that helps you get there, that's all involved in this. if your data is only as powerful, or if AI is only as powerful as the data it can access, then what you need to make sure that you're doing is across all of those systems, getting the data in, analyzing it, and then getting it out in a way that all of the agents can potentially use. So the blueprint for success in this case is to look at different case studies in your own industry, because the winners aren't just out there buying the most expensive software or using the most expensive AI tools. They're building global data templates that allow their PIM, their CRM, and their ERP to actually talk to each other. They're connecting those different business units so that the different agentic models can have a unified foundation. And that interoperability is exactly what will drive the next decade of B2B commerce. So with that said, I know we're focusing in a lot on these few different sections, but I want to take a look at some of the actual machinery around this. So to build out some of these global data templates that the AI agent can use, you have to look at this core triad a little bit more in detail. So if generative AI can write product descriptions, but agentic AI can actually build a quote or reorder inventory on a buyer's behalf, it can only do those things if those three systems are speaking the same language. So the PIM ends up being the what. What and how is that data, your product data, managed? If your AI needs clean attributes and it needs localization to understand exactly what it's selling and where it's selling. A great example of this is by trying to find, let's say that you have a business that's managing multiple brands, multiple websites, all using the same global product catalog, but without any real standardization. You need to find a way to standardize all of that information, to settle on a platform, to figure out how those products are the same between your different businesses. And if it's globally structured and flexible enough, that's exactly the kind of architecture that AI needs to be able to scale across a large B2B organization. And then you follow that up with your CRM, which is the who. So really on your websites, who are the people that are buying your products? How are they interacting with your website and your business in general? So if you have a business and you need to have centralized customers that lead that data, or to get that data, then you need to know who those customers are. So picking a centralized platform to store all of that customer information is key, something like Salesforce or some other CRM. But a real game changer for that is going to be building some kind of API gateway, which you can get at that information, combine it with your product information so that the customer and the product then become connected. You know who is buying the product, you know what they're buying, and you know how those interact across your different businesses. And then finally, when you're getting to the ERP, or the reality of how all of those things come together, you can have the best product data and the clearest buyer intent, but if the AI agent can't confidently execute a transaction or generate a reliable pipeline, it doesn't matter, because if you don't have real-time access to your warehouses or you don't know what your shipping methods are, then all of that isn't going to really matter. So having a unified gateway that can access all of that information in a unified way to connect the pieces together is what's going to make your business successful. So I guess lastly, like to kind of like close the loop on data interoperability, the last kind of thing that I want to say about this is it's a lot of work, and everyone's trying to get there at the same time. So really, what when we talk about agentic AI, we talk about it in a lot of times in terms of what's above the surface on the iceberg, the things that you can see, like the shopping agents. But the velocity to market is what is going to allow you to win. That time to value, and trying to find other ways to use AI accelerators to help to refine that data, aligning on tools, making sure that you have all the teams collaborating, consolidating brands, looking at different platforms to try to pull everything together. Those are where you're going to start to save time. But there is a catch. So to run an AI accelerator that's powerful, you need rock solid security and control. And you need to look at the bottom line. If you're centralizing incredibly sensitive behavioral, customer, and operational data, you need to make sure that you own it and protect it. Which kind of brings us to the next phase of the agentic AI. And I'm going to hand it back over to Adrian so we can talk a little bit about data sovereignty.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I like the messaging around the AI accelerator. I think we're living at a time where AI is doing nothing but accelerating time to value and speed to market on things. I mean, the velocity that we're able to ship products, to change features, to aggregate data, all of these things is just it's unprecedented, and it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be in the space. But yeah, back to the slides. Your commerce data is everywhere and nowhere. I'll explain that a little bit. And I'll explain it from the perspective of of us, right, of WebScale. So WebScale is traditionally a commerce infrastructure management company, right? So we work with very large, very complex B2B organizations. So a little bit of what you see on the slide and what I'll talk about might be a bit redundant from what Paul was talking about, right? But I really want to reinforce his statements. I want you to think about your own stack as I walk through this. So if I think about our clients that we support from a commerce infrastructure perspective that are trying to prepare for what is agentic commerce now and delivering agents out that are customer facing into their individual teams, you name it. They have ERP systems that know their pricing, and they know their contracts, they know their order history. They have dealer portals that we manage for them that we can tell who's logging in, all of the session data, what people are searching for, what they're abandoning. Then you have a storefront that's capturing browser session data, user behavior, search terms, session data, is all in real time. Paul mentioned the PIM a few times, right? Managing that entire product catalog. Then you have the CRM that's tracking accounts. Sales teams are managing contacts and contacts and pipeline. That's multiple systems, right? We're talking 5, 6, 7 systems minimum. Most of you all I know have more. And the problem is, as Paul is kind of represented here in the foundational stage, is that every single one of those systems was built by a different vendor. It's on a different schema. It's running on a different timeline. Technically, they were never designed to talk to each other. So this API gateway that Paul's alluding to is essentially this connectivity tissue so that the data stays, doesn't stay just where it lands and locked inside each of the individual systems that captured it. But in practice, what you want is your buyers to be able to, send signals that they don't even know that they're sending every single day, but you want to capture those signals, right? You want to know what they're searching for. You want to know what they're hesitating on. You want to know which products they keep coming back to, which accounts are quietly going dormant. It's behavioral intelligence, right? All of that exists somewhere in different components of your stack right now, but because it's fragmented, the team can't necessarily see it, they can't act on it, and you really can't use it in a rapid way to make better decisions. So it's not that you're missing the data, you're kind of missing the foundation, right, to be able to make it usable. And that's really the ownership problem that we're looking to solve here. Next slide. Cool. Real data ownership means one thing. So what is the path forward? We've talked a lot about the problem, right? So what does the path forward actually look like? So I want to break it into 3 steps. I want to be really specific about what each one of them means for your team, right? So the first step is structuring data. So this is where a CDP or customer data platform comes in. And I know there's a lot of independent CDPs sometimes built into different applications, but again, they're kind of sitting in their own little silos. So think of a data lake or a primary CDP as this refinery intake. You're plugging it into all of these other endpoints, and you're pulling in all of these signals that come from every single system in your stack, in your storefront, in your dealer portals, your distributor channels, your sales tools. You're consolidating that all into single unified buyer profile. The oil is still crude. It hasn't been refined yet, but it is at least consolidated into a place where you have one record per account, per contact, per buyer, right? And it's super critical because that profile then, once you harness it, it belongs to your organization. You own it, not just your vendors, not your platform providers. You actually own it, you control it, and it travels with you. Now, the second step is to actually refine that intent. So this is where something and what we implement is AI segmentation. And it really changes the game entirely. Traditional segmentation, you have to put a bunch of if then statements in order to build classifications and segments of data. But instead of having to wait days for an analyst to pull a report, your team can actually ask in their native language any question that they want. So you can interrogate the data and then get live deployable audiences in seconds, right? So which dealers placed an order 6 months ago and haven't been back, or which procurement buyers have been browsing a category but they haven't converted. Which accounts are showing early churn signals right now, right? You get these answers immediately. You get to ask it, interrogate it, and then you can actually act on those things, again, almost immediately. And the third step in the experience is actually executing an experience that people can interact with, right? Um, that refined intelligence, what it is, it just gets deployed at every surface area wherever commerce is happening. And it's not just external, right? It could be internal. So if you think of your buyers, right, your buyers can get a live assistant that knows their contract pricing, knows their order history, and it has context about their account. And then you have sales reps that are actually getting proactive alerts on account risk before a customer calls in to complain, or your ops team might get fulfillment exceptions surfaced like automatically and right away. So every single team, every single channel, all of this happening in real time. And that's really the full loop that we're trying to articulate here. This is not the full extent of how you can implement agents to be able to kind of automate the refinement of data, but in terms of how we can make what we've talked about so far a reality, I mean, this really is the full loop, right? You can capture information, you can understand what it is, and you can act on it. And a lot of this doesn't mean, or a lot of this doesn't necessarily mean that you're acting on it on your own. You can actually have an agent autonomously act on it on your behalf. That's the beauty of AI these days. Next slide. Cool. So I want to close with a little bit of a business case, right? Because ultimately, when you talk to leadership about a new tool, new capability, new implementation, this is what they ask about. So when your organization deploys this kind of agentic stack, right, the outcomes are actually pretty consistent, and they're actually going to show up across different parts of the business, right? So on the revenue side, we've seen conversion rates lift by more than 20% on average. And a lot of this is driven by that personalization, by a shopping assistant that's surfacing the right products to the right buyers at the right moment, right? Being able to capture that intent and convert that immediately. Email and campaign revenue, this typically increases by over 30%. And this is again because your segmentation is live. Your messaging is actually hitting the right audiences instead of just blasting emails out to a static list that you built last quarter or last month or even last week. Average order value we've seen go up 18% or more, right? Agents are actively recommending complementary products. They're flagging reorder opportunities. It's surfacing contract items that buyers forget that they even have access to. And then we talked about the cost and efficiency side, right? So customer acquisition cost drops. So we've seen, again, over 27% through kind of lookalike modeling, right? Paid media optimization, all grounded in first party data that you already own. So your team ends up spending a lot less time on manual segmentation because the AI is actually building and refreshing your audiences automatically based on what's happening live and in the moment. So eventually your campaign creation time tends to drop significantly as well, right? Your agents are handling content generation, scheduling, deployments that used to eat your marketing team's lunch for the whole week. So now your teams can actually move incredibly efficient with data that they can act on or have agents acting on their behalf. So it's definitely something that I want to leave you with, right? Is that none of this is theoretical. It's being implemented, as we speak. The team that I'm partnered with here is a team that we work with and consult with and integrate with on a pretty consistent basis, right? So these aren't just like projections from a white paper. These are outcomes that we actually see from organizations who are right now making the decision to stop treating data like a byproduct of just doing business and actually, using it like the strategic asset that it is. So back to the crude oil, right? It's always been there, but the question is are you going to build the refinery, or are you just going to keep watching somebody else do it first? So it's really the message that we want to convey. I mean, now's the time to act. And actually, with that said, I can hand it over to Vance at this point to talk about data sovereignty and what enforceable control looks like.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adrian. And I
Sure.
totally agree. It's probably the most exciting time at least in my career of being in e-commerce. It's just there's so much advancement that's happening so rapidly. It's really, really exciting. And always, as always, with rapid advancement, there also comes some considerations you need to be thoughtful of, right? Mindful of, especially when we're talking about data, and especially when it comes to sensitive data, right? And so, what does data sovereignty even mean? I think that's maybe a good place to start. Data sovereignty is effectively the enforceable control over where the data is processed and who can access it and which laws or terms apply. I think it's worth reading that word for word because it is a super important concept, and it's fantastic to have all this data, and the refined data can unlock incredibly smart outcomes, smarter commerce, smarter interactions with customers. Data sovereignty is really, really that missing piece, that part that enables the trust of the customer. Because I know that in today's market, there's certainly a lot of mistrust as well of AI and what it means for everything. So where does the data go? What data am I sharing with the platforms that I'm interacting with? And so one of the main things I want to highlight here is less around leveraging and pushing the data into these other places, but what are some of the access controls that you should enforce and make sure that you're adhering to ensure that you're protecting your brand from potential damage from other external sources that might not be as comfortable with how their data is being used and how that interaction is being captured. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of what a sovereign agent architecture could look like. And I think it harkens back a little bit to what Paul was talking about around the systems where you're harvesting this crude oil and where that information is being captured and registered. One of the important things is that you're keeping that data where it is and bringing the agent to that data. So making sure that agent is only able to access that data within strict scopes. They're not able to just carte blanche extract it and run all sorts of machine learning and sorts of things on that data, because unless your customers consented to that extraction, that capturing, you might be in trouble, right? So making sure that you're able to track and keep your data safe and secure is really, really important especially when we're talking about the agentic era. And certainly things that we've seen, at least from the e-com side, of being able to access data and how can you use that data? What's the scope that the customer agreed to when they're submitting that order? All those things come into play, and so they need to be considered when we're talking about an agentic workflow. So it's really important that the agent is coming to the data. The other thing that's really important to make sure that you have in place is that the agents are enforcing effectively it's referred to as least privileged scopes. So make sure that they only have read access to what they can read, right? They don't have write access to anything more than they need to. If you enable the agent to, one of the things about agents in particular that's great and it's kind of a double-edged sword is that agents can interact with so many systems at once. Like Paul mentioned, an agent can go and can go ping your ERP, your PIM, and your CMS or CRM, and get all sorts of data for that. What that does, though, too, is it increases the scope of the area that they can impact. So if they have write access to all of those systems, they might be making changes that you're not aware of or not necessarily authorizing. So making sure that you're bringing that together to where you're giving them the right scope and the right permissions to do the right tasks, the tasks that you're enabling them to do. And then last but not least, certainly an audit ledger, making sure you're tracking, okay, hey, this information was requested, this is what we gave back, this is maybe changes that the agent made. Anything like that, it's really important to keep track of just as we move. So, next slide. So let's talk about what Shopper is doing and how we've decided to approach this. And one of the things that I think is really important is that we're trying to be a leader in the space, certainly around agentic and AI commerce. And so one of the first things that I think is really, really powerful about the way Shopper is implemented is that you have a choice of your deployment of where you deploy your store. So Shopware is open source software. You can deploy it anywhere you want. You can host it on your own servers, or of course, We have a great web hosting provider on this call right here, Adrian, who would be happy to chat with you about where to host your e-commerce store. The next thing is, of course, Shopware being API first. We give customers absolute authority and control over interacting and setting the scopes for which an agent or agents or other external systems could interact with Shopware. You can grant read, write permissions at a per kind of user role level. And also our APIs were kind of agentic by design. So we've intentionally exposed only the things that are basically considered our store APIs, the things that are deemed effectively safe for public use. So if you're locking your product information behind a login or something like that, then the same thing happens with the APIs. And then we have a sovereign native AI implementation. So Shopware has agentic tools built into the platform, but all of those were designed and integrated with the AI provider to make sure that we're not sharing that data for the purpose of training. So the agents are not training on any of that data. We're very explicit about which data can be used and which data can't be used to make sure that the customers are actually able to provide consent before data is used. And GDPR compliance is a real thing in Europe and in California, and kind of a lot of other places too. So important things to note. All that said, that's kind of the wet blanket side of things. Like make sure you're taking care of compliance, the part that anybody really wants to talk about, the less glamorous stuff. But next slide. I want to just leave off on the topic of all the exciting things that Agentic does unlock. And so this is kind of echoing back to what Adrian and Paul have already alluded to, but things like complex real-time quoting and orders, real-time insights into what customers are doing, any sort of personalized recommendations and intelligent workflow automation. These are all the promises and the exciting things about AI, and especially Agentic. You just want to make sure that you're doing everything in a safe way so that you don't get sued. With that, I'll turn it back to Emily.
All right. Thanks. Thanks to Adrian and Paul and Vance for sharing those insights. We are here to help. We have wrapped up this webinar, but the conversation can continue. So if you feel like you want to learn more, go ahead and scan that QR code and set up some time to meet with us, or reach out and email any of the experts on this panel from today. We'd be happy to talk with you about, whatever stage you're at in your data preparedness and how you're looking at Agentic for your business. So thanks again for joining us. We're signing off now. If you haven't watched the first webinar in this series, we'll link it up for you. And take care, everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.